Colorado will have another obstructionist law coming soon. So, just weeks after Senate Bill 181, which we featured in a previous episode, uh, was introduced, now there's House Bill 1261, and this will set CO2 emission goals for the state of Colorado of 20 reduction goals of 26% by 2025, 50% by 2030, and 90% by 2050, and also a bunch of strategies primarily based on renewables, as the language reveals, um, in the state. So the 26% reduction by 2025 uh, is actually already in place by executive order from former Governor Hickenlooper. And so I think this reflects that the Senate Bill 181, the older bill, actually wasn't about a reasonable reform of regulations in Colorado, where you just want to make good regulations to protect the health, while also developing. So the ultimate goal by the majority in the Colorado legislature, which is of course Democratic right now, um, is actually to end all consumption and production of fossil fuels in the state. And the bill's language says, yeah, currently harmful climate change impacts are happening, and we need to adhere to the goal of limiting planetary warming to 1.5 degrees C. And we want to transition to 100% clean economy, is how they formulate it. And of course, again, the argument is this will be an economic boon to Colorado, and we will be leaders in this, and there will be no negative consequence, or at least there are no negative consequences mentioned in the current version of the bill. And one particularly bad part of this type of legislation, besides it being super local in Colorado, of course, in the grand scheme of things, doesn't matter that much in terms of CO2 emissions, but it also punishes oil and gas rich states locally. So even if you would say, okay, we want to gradually phase out fossil fuels, what you're doing with this kind of local legislation is you're punishing the developers in your state, and then still the oil and gas will probably be consumed, but it will be produced somewhere else. So that's another example where local government control is not necessarily making things better.
Yeah, Colorado. I talked, by the way, about Colorado and my arguing to 100 thing. It's a really scary state right now because it's got a lot of, I would say, positive momentum from the past in terms of they've done a lot of good things. They've had affordable energy. They've historically generated a lot of their energy from coal. They have obviously a lot of hydrocarbons in the ground. They've developed a lot in the past, and yet they have this morally almost intransigent movement that's calling for these suicidal policies. And it's it's kind of the same thing as everywhere else, just the need to have a positive alternative and then the need to expose the nature of these proposals, but also the forms of energy that they advocate. I've become more and more im- uh, insistent on the idea that, more and more confident in the idea that it's really important to expose the nature of unreliables, including all these battery schemes, because people just have this completely false view of these alternatives, both their practicality and their lack of any kind of negative byproducts. And that's really skewing things. I think that properly demonizing the problems with the alternatives is a very, very important thing, because what we want people to be doing is we want people to be looking at the pros and cons of different processes, like the actual pros and cons of different processes, not just the positives of a fantasy and then the exaggerated negatives of what we do now.